When you look at that wall behind me, you will notice that there are three flags. The two at the top, Turkey and Canada, are the countries of which I am a citizen of, thankfully. The one on the bottom, America, is a country that I'm unfortunately not a citizen of, but I lived there for over 8 years. So I know what I'm talking about when it comes to America. And it's one of the best countries on earth. Fuck what the media says. They don't know anything, and all they want to do is stir the pot. And I want to talk to you guys a little bit about the differences between America and Canada, because people like to ask me that all the time. They say, what is America better at than Canada? What is Canada better at than America? So we're going to break down a few things here in this video. Numero uno is a difference in work culture. Canadians are a lot more employee-minded, while Americans are a lot more entrepreneurial. When you look at Canada, since Justin Bieber and Drake, they've impacted the world in incredible ways when it comes to artistry and music. Since then, we haven't had a lot of breakout stars coming out of Canada, and we aren't really a big innovative country. We have so much resources here, but none of it's really being used. You could get so many big drilling companies or oil companies up in northern Canada, and they could extract so much of that and sell it all over the world. We have some of the largest supplies of clean water in the world here in Canada, yet it's just sitting there, not being used because of environmental regulations. And environmental regulations are not a bad thing, but Canada has made it a bad thing. And that ties into the second point, is Canadian politicians are infinitely worse than American politicians. They're so bad. I just want to slap them. I hate them so much because this country is amazing. Canada is such a wonderful country filled with great people, with incredible resources and so much land, yet we're not using any of that land to actually build houses for Canadians. And the people are constrained because they have no money, since everything is just getting more and more expensive. And the politicians don't have a problem with that. They're not trying to make the life of Canadians better. Our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, is one of the biggest idiots to ever walk the planet. And somehow he's managed to get reelected to Canadian Prime Minister 3 times. It's crazy. That guy needs someone to put their fingers in his nostrils and lift him up and just do like a big power move on him. It's so bad how complacent the politicians here are. I was talking about land. You look at Canada, we are the second biggest country on earth, yet housing prices here are so ridiculously high that no one can afford to live anymore. You look at two of the biggest cities in Canada, like Toronto and Vancouver, and housing is so unaffordable that people have to live 2 to 3 people in a 1-bedroom apartment, when rent is about 2,600 to 2,700 Canadian dollars per month for a little 400 square foot place. You don't have a choice. It's so bad and it's so unaffordable. People go to work all the time. Some of them actually have to find a second job just to make ends meet, yet they're never home for the place they're paying for because they're always working. It's a weird paradox here. And it's not like New York, where it's so expensive to live in New York. I agree. But it's New York. New York is a whole different energy. It's the best. If I wasn't living in Montreal here, which is, in my opinion, the best place to live in Canada, I don't know if I could live in this country anymore. I lived in Toronto. I lived in Calgary. I've been to Vancouver. And those 2 cities that I lived in, I'm like, man, I don't want to live here. Montreal is just so much better because it's in French Canada, Quebec. And there is an energy in this city that isn't found in other places in Canada. That comes from the politicians here who are in charge. They want to conserve that French identity. And I think they're doing a good job of it, because so far the plague that's consuming the rest of Canada, with everything skyrocketing in expense, is not hitting Quebec or Montreal as hard. Yeah, things are more expensive here now than they were before, but it's still about half the price than it is in Toronto and Vancouver, which is a big, big difference. Canadian politicians have no spine. They're all little cowards who were the nasally kids in school who became class president, and then they decided to run for office here in Canada and somehow got elected because their competition just would rather do other stuff instead of running the country. So I hope, we get a better leader here in Canada, like a guy like Pierre Poilievre. He seems like he's going to be the next Prime Minister of Canada, a little more conservative. And I hope to God he wins because we need better leadership here, like immediately. And the third thing is finally something better about Canada. University and college is so much cheaper here than it is in America. In America, you're looking at probably 30 to 40 grand. That's if you're going to an out-of-state school. So if you graduate high school in Texas and you want to go to college in California, you're probably going to pay 30, 40 grand. But if you want to go to school in Texas, which is the state you graduated from, you're probably going to pay like 10 to 15 grand for the same thing. In Canada, every school that's public costs about anywhere from 6,000 to 8,000 Canadian dollars to attend per year, as long as you're a Canadian citizen or permanent residence. And that's a very good thing. So you don't have to go into as much debt to get an education, which is amazing. I mean, America, bro, 40 grand a year. Are you kidding me? You do that for 4 years, you're paying 160 grand plus interest, and you can never get out of that debt for the rest of your life. Even if you declare bankruptcy, that's literally, you're chaining yourself to a wall for the rest of your life. And it's so bad how they're taking advantage of students and literally kids. They're telling 17, 18-year-old kids, yeah, go into 150 grand, 200 grand of debt, you know, and you can get a job where you make 50 grand a year, but the interest accumulates and you can never pay it off. So you're in your 60s, 70s, you're still paying off that debt from when you were a teen. It's crazy. But in Canada, it's not as bad because you can probably pay off most of your student loans by the time you're in your 30s. So it's not as bad. And if you got some money saved up, I know a lot of people when I was in school, what they would do is they would work all summer long like crazy and make enough money to be able to afford their tuition. So when they graduate, they have no debt at all. So they get out of it scot-free, and then they're able to start working in the real world with a clean slate. So that's one of the good benefits of Canada when compared to America. Numero 4, which is healthcare. Oh my God, this is probably the biggest difference between Canada and America. America is crazy when it comes to healthcare. It's ridiculous. Nobody should be paying that much money to go to a doctor or a hospital visit. Most Americans think healthcare in Canada is completely free. It's not. We pay a lot more in taxes so we can actually have access to healthcare. And here is the big problem with that. Because right now where I live in Quebec, there is an incredibly big shortage of family doctors, and nurses are getting paid close to no money, and ERs here in the hospitals are completely filled to the brim, to the point the province is telling people, if you got an emergency, don't go to the ER. Just stay home and ride it out, which is inexcusable. Like, we're paying so much money, and you're telling us not to go to the ER when there's an emergency? Slap you in the face for saying that. If you go to a hospital here in Canada, you may end up having to wait 30 hours to see a doctor just because of how crowded it is. And that's really, really bad. I don't like that aspect of Canada. But here's the big plus. When you do need something, and this happened to me, I went to a hospital once with some heart issues. I thought I was having a big problem, and they ran all kinds of tests, ECGs, x-rays, CAT scans, blood tests, and a few others that I forget now, and I didn't have to pay anything out of pocket for any of it. If I had done the same thing in America, gone to a hospital with a heart problem, ECGs, CAT scans, x-rays, blood tests, I'm probably going to pay 50, 60 grand just for getting those tests done. Luckily, nothing was found, so I would have had to pay 50, 60 grand just for them to say, yeah, you're good. There's not a problem with you. And that's a really, really bad thing. I also knew a friend in Texas whose father had to have open heart surgery. He was in his 40s and he worked as a chef. He had this surgery, and afterwards they hit him with a bill of 240 grand. That's crazy. You have no choice but to get it. So he got it, but then he had to leave the country and move to Turkey, where he's also a citizen, and he now lives there because he has unpaid medical debt in America. And if he goes there, they're gonna find a way to get that money from him somehow. It's crazy how expensive it is. But of course, in America, you can go to a hospital and they will take care of you right away. You're not gonna have to wait long, and they have so many doctors on standby. You're good to go. But there is the ups and downs, so it depends on the situation. I got a friend here in Canada also. He's been waiting to have surgery on his knee for over a year. They still haven't called him up for it. He's in pain the entire time, but that's how it is in Canada. So depending on who you ask, would you rather have one or the other? I think it changes, and it's really a situational thing. and you can make your own decisions based on that. Number 5 is Canada is so much more tolerant of other cultures and other people. This is one of, if not the most tolerant place in the world. You go to Toronto, you go to Montreal, you go to Vancouver, you're going to see people of all races, all backgrounds, all kinds of sexual preferences getting along without any issues. And you only really realize how different it is when you leave the cities here in Canada. You're like, okay, it's actually better in Canada for how tolerant everyone and everything is. You can walk into a store and you'll see a person who's transgender working, and they will have a conversation with someone who might be a total right-winger, and it won't be an issue. They will get along very well, which I like that because everyone gets respect here. No one really has any reason to disrespect just off of prejudices. And that's something that America needs to work on, because first impressions are often what people use to disrespect others in America, which I don't really like. Sure, it's a very tolerant place to live also, but it's not as tolerant as Canada is. Number 6 is Canada is so much more safer than America. The first thing is guns are nowhere near as widespread in Canada as they are in America. I lived in the hood area of Toronto for years. It's called Jane and Finch. It's one of the more dangerous areas of Toronto, which is the biggest city in Canada. I would walk outside at night by myself all the time and nothing would happen. I wouldn't be slightly worried. I never once had an issue. And I know some people who also got mugged at night, and that's the way it is. But I could not do that in America. I couldn't, for example, walk in Compton in Los Angeles by myself at night. That would not be an option. Or in somewhere like in Baltimore, I couldn't do that at night. It'd be very dangerous to do so. Or in the South Bronx in New York. I'm asking for trouble by doing something like that. It just doesn't happen here in Canada. Here, it's a lot more safer. The big cities in Canada are some of the safest cities in all of North America. People are generally more respectful to each other here in Canada than they are in America. And the last thing is there is a lot less nationalism in Canada than there is in America. You know, being a patriotic America is a business. People love to spout American flags. They love to deck their cars out in American gear, wear patriotic boots, get America tattoos. You don't often see that here in Canada. You see a lot less of it. There is such a less sense of nationalism here in this country. And that's okay. It's not really a big problem because Canada likes to piggyback on America whenever America does anything. And I don't really see that being an issue unless the countries go to war. And there's no reason for Canada to really be involved in any war. What they like to do instead is that they like to give a lot of money. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars to Ukraine without giving any proper explanation why. But Canadians aren't getting upset enough about it to make a difference. They can't really be bothered enough to demand that the Prime Minister not do this. They don't want to be bothered. That's the Canadian culture, is just don't bother me, bro. Just go away. I'll do my thing, you do your thing. And then they'll be passive-aggressive the entire time. I want to end off on this final note here. Both Canada and America have freedom of speech laws, which I love. That's amazing. Canada's freedom of speech is a little more restricted than America's is, but we still have freedom of speech. We can openly criticize the people in power, the government, and we're not going to have to be worried about anything. You try doing that in a country like Turkey, you might end up going to jail. So I love that we have freedom of speech in these countries. You can say whatever you want, and you're going to be fine. People might disagree with you, and that's okay. Disagreements are a natural part of life, and it tends to happen. So I just want to talk about this. That's it for now. I'll see you next time.